What's going on YouTube? Welcome back to the second part of the restoration on these Air Jordan 4 alternate 89s. Last week I left off with giving the shoe a proper deep clean and show you guys how to do prep work on the leather, midsoles, and plastic areas of the shoe. This week I'm gonna show you guys how to properly repaint the leather, the midsoles, and plastic areas of the shoe. We got a lot of work to finish up, you guys, so let's get started. Last week we left off with doing a lot of sanding on the white leather. By doing so, we frayed a lot of the stitching using the sandpaper. All around, it's pretty messy and frayed. It's really hard to tell on camera, but when we go in and apply the new paint job, all that stuff will be shown. So it's better to take care of that now using a lighter. All done with that. Now before we move on to the fun stuff, which is painting, we gotta do some taping. We'll be taping off everything but the white leather and the white plastic areas of this shoe. Honestly guys, taping is one of the most boring steps in a restoration, but it is one of the most important. If you guys are not doing a good job when it comes to this step, you will get paint in areas you don't want paint at, and you will have a really crappy restoration when it's all said and done. So make sure you guys are taking your time doing this. All done with the tape job. The tape stuck nicely to the sole and midsole, but I did have a hard time laying it down on sock liner and netting. The tape just doesn't stick very well to those materials. So what I did, we used a heat gun to heat up the tape in order for it to stick nicely to the material. The problem is, within a couple of minutes, the tape will start to come undone, so I have to paint this side right away. Once the side is all done, we'll heat up the tape over here, lay it down nice and flat, and take care of this side. We'll be using Jacquard white paint and my airbrush. All done laying down the paint on this side, looks really good. Now moving on to this side, like I mentioned earlier, we gotta use the heat gun on the tape in order for it to stick well so we don't get any paint on the netting or sock liner. Good to go with that. Before we move on to laying down the paint on this side of the shoe, I do want to give you guys a couple of tips. The first one being, as you're laying down the paint, keep the airbrush moving. Don't focus on one spot because that will mess up the paint job. Another one, make sure you guys are doing thin coats. Never do heavy coats because that will mess with the wearability of your shoe. And the third one, make sure you guys are using the heat gun in between each coat because that will help dry the shoe a lot faster. All done with the paint job. I did a pretty good job with the prep work. That's why it looks so freaking good. A couple of things I do want to mention though is I still got to repaint the black Jumpman. It's white now, got to be black. Another thing is the alternate 89 that was originally behind the heel tab is completely gone. It's one of those things I couldn't salvage. The back tab was super yellow. The alternate 89 was fading away. I just painted it over it. It's one of those details that I don't really care for, but if you guys are working on the shoe at home, you got two options. You could paint over it, or you could paint over it and create a stencil for it and repaint it on there, but that's just a lot of work. So moving on, we gotta go outside, protect this paint job using some Krylon matte finish. All right, we're outside. For this step, you always wanna make sure you're out here, never indoors, because this stuff stinks. Another thing you wanna watch out for is overdoing it. If you overdo it, the paint job will turn yellow, it'll be really chalky, and it'll just mess it up completely. Make sure you just give it a couple of passovers. Matte finish looks good, let's keep it moving. The next step we're gonna move on to is the heel tab. I know I said I was gonna paint over the Jumpman back to black, but instead, using an X-Acto knife and little scissors, we're simply gonna go ahead and scrape off all the paint very carefully. The reason why I'm doing this is because it'll be a lot easier instead of having to paint the Jumpman all around, including the sides of it black. This step is tedious as well, but not as tedious as painting the whole Jumpman black. We're getting pretty close to removing the paint off the Jumpman. The sides are looking pretty good. I still have to go back and remove some of the paint and clean up some of the details, but overall, it's looking really good. What we're gonna move on to next is to use my Dremel to clean off the surface of the Jumpman. This step will be a lot easier using my Dremel instead of the X-Acto knife. Heel tab's all done, came out really crisp, looks almost factory. Now, moving on to the next step with this restoration, we gotta remove all the tape on the shoe so we can re-tape around the midsoles. All done with the uppers, now let's jump over to the midsoles. We gotta tape around them. Like I mentioned earlier, the tape job's super important. Make sure you guys are taking your time doing the step. Make sure you leave no gaps or empty spaces, because if you get any red paint on that freshly painted white upper, you're gonna have to go back and spend a lot of time fixing that. Almost done with the tape job, guys. What I'm doing now is placing paper towels on the uppers of the shoe. That way it'll save us tape and it'll prevent us from putting tape on the freshly painted uppers. Shoe is fully taped up, paper toweled up. Let's lay down our paint. For this pre-mixed color, I used 3 different colors from Jacquard: silver, iridescent red, and metallic red. Pretty simple mix. Let's go ahead and lay it down using my Iwata airbrush. all done laying down the red paint. Looks super vibrant, back to how it's supposed to be. Now the next step we gotta do to protect this paint job is to recreate the glossy finish using some crystal clear outside. Same thing as the matte finish, you guys. All you wanna do is give it a few swipes. Don't overdo this step because it will mess up the paint job. We're back inside. We let the glossy finish dry for about an hour. Let's go ahead and remove all the tape. Tape is completely gone. As you can see, this restoration is pretty much all done. Looks on point. Before we could wrap it up, we gotta do some quick touch-up work on the netting. Earlier in this video, when I was spraying the white on the shoe, I did get a bit of overspray on the red netting. Nothing crazy. Using some alcohol prep pads, we're gonna go in and wipe that stuff off. Last step, lace the shoe. That's gonna wrap it up on part 2 of this full restoration on these alternate 89 Air Jordan 4s. This shoe was completely trashed, you guys. The first step I did to bring the shoe back to life was give the shoe a proper deep clean using our 3-brush advanced alarm system and our detergent. We got rid of all the grime and dirt, odors, and disinfected the shoe completely inside and out. Once the cleaning process was all done, you guys, we moved on to using Vick's theory of solar sole reversal, as most of you guys may know it as SSR, to get rid of all the yellowing off these soles. Did a lot of prep work on the shoe. We sanded down the uppers, the plastic areas, and finished it off with the midsoles. Once that was good to go, we taped it all off, repainted the uppers, repainted the plastic areas, and finished it off by repainting the midsoles and got it back to its original glory. You can find all the stuff you see right here at Reshoevn8r.com. Use my promo code in the description below. This is Vick Almighty. I'll see you guys next Monday.